Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live session on the ECFMG Pathways. My name is Nader Hassan, founder of MedFox Academy. Now, in this session, we're talking about the 2022-2023 ECFMG Pathways. We have some very exciting content coming soon, especially regarding tips and strategies for having a solid residency application, including how to search for programs, strategies on letters of recommendations, best tips on obtaining U.S. clinical experiences, personal statements, interview strategies, and a lot more. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn. Now, just a disclaimer, at this time, I'm not ECFMG certified, but I have been verified through Pathway 6. I did apply for residency, so I'm looking forward to this year's match. So fingers crossed. I will graduate in less than 2 months, after which I'll receive my ECFMG certification. Having said that, I'll share my experiences in going through the ECFMG pathways, as well as my experience in applying for residency, which was an exciting time for me. So let's talk. Now, I know there are those who are familiar with the pathways, but I wanted to go through a quick review of the pathways for those who are not familiar. Historically, to get ECFMG certified, all we needed to do generally was to graduate from a foreign medical school, complete USMLE Step 1 and Step 2 CK, as well as Step 2 CS, and apply for certification. And that was it. But since the cancellation of CS, ECFMG introduced the so-called pathways for ECFMG certification. Now, the purpose of this pathway is to essentially replace CS, which means that we have to demonstrate our clinical skills. Now, each pathway has its own set of requirements, but there are 3 major steps for all the pathways. The first is that applicants are required to complete USMLE Step 1 and Step 2, as was the case previously. But the next requirement is that applicants are required to complete the Occupational English Test, or OET. Now, the OET is an exam that's been administered for years by physicians, nurses, dentists, and other healthcare professionals throughout the world, but especially in countries like UK and Australia, among others. Finally, there's the $925 application fee that we have to pay. So a lot of people, obviously, we complain about this $925 fee, and there was no fee previously for ECFMG certification. The thing is that before, for CS, we had to pay, at the time it was $1,400, close to $1,500. So that's been canceled, obviously. So now we have to pay this fee along with the fee for OET, which is around $425, $450, if I remember correctly. So combine those 2 fees together comes out to about $1,500. So we're paying the same amount of money, but it's just going to different aspects of our ECFMG application. So that's something to know there. All right, so right now we're just going to talk about the ECFMG pathways in general. All this information is available on the ECFMG website, so we're not going to go into much detail here. Just going to breeze right through it. The first pathway is for those who are licensed physicians in a country other than the United States. Now, the license should not have been subject to any disciplinary action. So it must be a license that has never been suspended or under any disciplinary action previously. We'll talk a little bit more about this pathway when we discuss the latest announcements from ECFMG. Now, pathway 2 will be for applicants who attended or have graduated from a med school that administers a standardized clinical skills exam, or OSCE, specifically required for medical licensure by the regulation authority in that country. Now, this med school must meet the requirements of ECFMG, and the applicant must successfully complete the OSCE. And there's a list of schools that are approved through this pathway that's also on the ECFMG website, and we'll include that link in the chat here and in the description on the YouTube video. The third pathway is for applicants who attended a school that's accredited by an accrediting body that's recognized by the World Federation of Medical Education, or WFME. Now, the WFME is not an accrediting body. It's a directory for schools that have been approved by an accrediting body, usually under another body called FAMER. So it gets a little complicated, but basically, if your school is listed in WFME, then you're going to apply through Pathway 3. Pathway 4 is regarding the so-called NCFMEA, which is a US committee that looks at other international accrediting body and compares them with the standards of US medical education. And finally, Pathway 5 is for those who attended a med school that has a joint partnership with a US med school that's been accredited by the LCME, or Liaison Committee on Medical Education. Now, the LCME is only an accrediting body for the US and Canadian med schools, but you have certain med schools in the US that have affiliations in other countries, such as Cornell in Qatar and Duke in Singapore. So those are the two schools there. Now, if you're unsure of which pathway your school is going to go through, one great resource that we'll provide in the description is the ECFMG page that's titled Medical Schools That Are Eligible for Pathways 2 through 5. So ECFMG gives you a full list of schools there, all the schools that are eligible for the pathways 2 through 5, and it gives you on the side which pathway those applicants should apply through. So I included that link in the chat as well. It's going to be on the description in the YouTube video as well. So where does Pathway 6 come in? Well, basically, if you don't meet any of the requirements for the 5 pathways, then you're going to apply through Pathway 6, which is where I want to focus the rest of our attention here. So Pathway 6 is for those who don't meet the requirements for Pathways 1 through 5, but it's also for applicants who have not passed CS after 1 or more attempts. But if you eventually pass CS, then you would simply apply through ECFMG, with some exceptions that we won't get into today unless somebody in the chat has a question. So as we discussed, Pathway 1 through 5, also for those who failed CS 1 or more time. So applicants going through Pathway 6 would need to complete something called the Mini-CEX, or the mini clinical evaluation exercise. So Pathway 6 was actually the path that I applied through. So I'll share my experience with you here. And to do a Mini-CEX, you would have to contact a physician. Now, ECFMG has a full criteria on the criteria for approved physicians, rather. But generally, we'll talk about a few here. But generally, the physician first should hold an unrestricted license to practice medicine without supervision for at least 5 years. The physician also should not be a relative. And also the physician should not be compensated, and the physician should not be compensated by you or by a third party. So not by your medical school or any third party for that matter. So no compensation for your assessment. ECFMG is very adamant about this. So basically the way it works is that when the ECFMG Pathways portal opens up, which last year was sometime around August, and I imagine that this year will probably be around the same time, you'll submit your Pathways application. So when you submit your Pathways application, you're required to pay the fee there, $925 for this year. And then you'll see, once you go through all that, you'll see a clinical encounters tab on your dashboard there. And that's where you'll go through to request a Mini-CEX assessment from a physician. So when you request that, the physician will approve it, or they'll get a link to create a profile if they haven't already. And then you'll do the assessment with the physician. You'll schedule whatever time works for both of you, and then you'll do an assessment with the patient. The process for requesting is actually very simple. I don't think you'll have trouble with navigating through the software. It's actually very user-friendly. I think the trouble that students will have, and we have had for last cycle, is finding a physician to do the clinical encounters with. Hopefully you won't have this trouble, because there was a little learning curve considering that this was the first year that they did it. Hopefully a lot more physicians would be familiar with the process. But at this time, I would recommend to you, for anyone who's applying for Pathway 6, to reach out to physicians who meet the requirements and let them know that you're applying for ECFMG certification, and that you would need them to complete a clinical encounter to test your clinical skills, and maybe offer to spend the day with them to see patients. Maybe that'll appeal to them more, and that'll help with your process. Now, based on the recent ECFMG announcement, the pathways will be more or less the same as the last 2 years. They did mention that they would release some more information later in the year, but the major changes seem to have already been laid out by the last announcement. And we'll put the link in the description and the chat area as well. So what changed with the announcements? I would say the first change is that for all those who are applying, who have applied rather for ECFMG certification, they had their expiration dates or the validity date to be December 31st, 2022. So their ECFMG certification would have expired this year if they didn't get into an ACGME approved residency program. However, ECFMG extended that validity date until December 31st, 2024. So good news from ECFMG. Probably the only good news that we've ever received from ECFMG. Another change is the graduation date for those applying through pathways 2, 3, 4, and 5. So applicants should have a medical school graduation date of either on or after January 1st, 2021. So this is something to keep in mind. Another change is for pathway 1, and it's regarding the date of registration of your license or the date of licensure. For last year, the date of registration seemed to have been January 1st, 2015. The recent announcements brought up that date to January 1st, 2018. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The next change is for pathway 2, and it's regarding the clinical assessments that your med school provides. So as we discussed, some med schools provide a clinical assessment as part of their curriculum. So for those applying through pathway 2, applicants would need to complete the OSCEs through an acceptable med school. Now, uh, ECFMG will provide a list of what's deemed acceptable. We'll provide the link for last year that they provided, but keep an eye out for any for a future or updated list rather of that link that we provided in the description. The final change is regarding pathway 6. For the last cycle, physicians were able to administer a Mini-CEX for an unlimited number of applicants. Now it seemed that ECFMG is now capping the number of applicants that physicians can evaluate at 10 applicants. So in other words, physicians are only allowed to complete a total of 10 Mini-CEX evaluations. So I think this is going to make it a little more difficult for applicants, of course. But one thing that you can do is let the physician know, as we discussed earlier, let them know ahead of time that you're applying for ECFMG certification. We would really appreciate if they took the time to evaluate you. And you can even reach out to them and let them know that if they agree, and let them know that ECFMG has a new a guideline this year that physicians are capped at 10 applicants. So just to ensure that they don't overbook you or overbook other students rather, and then you're left scrambling for another doctor. All right, so that's something to keep in mind there. And one thing I want to remind everyone, do not do the clinical evaluations before the portal opens up. So there's a window between when it opens up, as we discussed, will probably be around August till December when the pathway applications are due. You should do the clinical evaluations within that window. Do not do it sooner than that. ECFMG will not accept it. So that's something to keep in mind. So a lot of applicants usually ask, what should we do now to prepare for the ECFMG pathways? Well, I would say the first and most important thing to do is to complete your OET exam as soon as possible. Those spots fill up very quickly. And I would just say here that don't underestimate this exam. That's not to say that it's a difficult exam. I know a lot of students are intimidated by this exam, especially if English is not your first language. But I want to say that even some English speakers failed this exam, and it's not because of its difficulty. It's not again, it's not a difficult exam. It's because that they did underestimate this exam, and they felt that they didn't need to prepare for it because, hey, I'm a native English speaker. This exam has a structure that you should be familiar with. And there are tons of free resources online that you could go through. The first is the OET website itself. It gives you a lot of practice exams that you could do, writing, listening, reading, and then they'll kind of give you a feel of how the exam is going to be conducted, so you're not surprised on exam day. So it tells you exactly what to expect on the exam, and that was a great resource. But another one that I used was a YouTube channel called E2 OET, and we'll put the link in the description there. Shout out to E2. It was a very helpful resource. They walk you through exactly how the exam is going to be structured, what to expect on the exam, how the reading section was, how the writing section was, how the listening section was. It was a great resource. So be sure to check them out over there. So just in summary, be prepared, don't be scared. That's all for the OET exam. Now, for those applying for Pathway 6, we discussed this before. One thing that you could prepare now is to reach out to the physicians. Again, don't do the evaluations now. Just simply reach out to the physicians as a heads up that, hey, when the portal will be opening up down in August, we would have to do some evaluations for our ECFMG certification. So just let them know ahead of time. Give them a few months to prepare or um, uh, to expect, to know what to expect down the line. And again, don't forget to mention that they're only allowed to do it for 10 applicants. So don't let them overbook students there. Other than that, there is very little you could do to prepare for the pathways. As long as you're in med school, you keep on in med school and complete all your rotations. For IMGs, I always recommend that you start a thorough search of residency programs to find which programs aligned with your qualifications as well as your goals. We actually just finished recording a mini course on how to search for residency programs. That's going to be up on our website very soon. So be sure to join in our membership area for the latest details, as well as some upcoming courses on your residency application. So be sure to join our membership area for the latest updates on that. Another thing is to try to get as much U.S. clinical experience as you can. This, along with letters of recommendations, are some of the most important things that program directors look in a residency application. So, again, we should try our best to prepare for the pathways, but also don't forget to prepare for your residency application itself. So, clinical experience, letters of recommendation. Obviously, try to do your best on your exam. So these are some things to focus on in regards to the pathway. And now we're going to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions here, you can put them in the chat box. Is step one going pass fail good or bad for IMGs? Well, it's not good or bad, and I don't think that we should think of it as good or bad. I think that there's going to be some changes in the way programs look at applicants, and this is obviously the first year, so we don't know, we don't have any data. But think of it from a program director's point of view. Two of the most important things that program directors looked for was step one and step two, right? To screen for applicants, to invite for interviews. But with step one being pass or fail, this is obviously going to put a lot more weight on step two. So this should be the focus of a lot of applicants applying for next cycle, to really focus on bringing up their step two score, especially if they've taken step one after pass fail. But again, and this is something I talk about in searching for programs course that'll be up very soon on our website. Not everything is your USMLE scores. There are ways we should search for programs that kind of meet our requirements. There should be a strategic way to search for programs, and there are a lot of tools, free tools like Residency Explorer, Frida, the ACAGME website, as well as some paid programs like Match a Resident. So again, try to do as best as you can on your USMLE exams, but also focus on other aspects of your applications like US clinical experiences, your personal statements, and other aspects that we'll talk about soon. So to answer the question, not good, not bad, just a different way that program directors will look at your application, I think. How important is research for residency applications? Well, if we look at the NRMP Program Directors Survey, which is a survey that comes out every year by the NRMP, so they ask a number of program directors, what do you consider the most important aspects when inviting applicants for an interview and when looking at applicants, their application? If we look at clinical research, it actually comes below, obviously, USMLE Step 1, Step 2, but it also comes below US clinical experience, letters of recommendations. So based on that survey alone, it looks like US clinical experience is much more important than research. Um, Having said that, if research is something that you are passionate about, this is something that really could come out in your personal statement, and it'll really show your passion for an additional side of to medicine, right? So if research is something you're passionate about, by all means, go ahead and do it. Absolutely. And talk about that in your personal statement. Talk about it with your preceptors, so they include that in your letter of recommendation. My point is, we're often under this impression as IMGs that we should just do research, research, research to bring up your application. There are other things that are more important than research, like US clinical experience and letters of recommendation. But again, by all means, if you're interested in research, definitely engage in that. Is there such thing as IMG friendly states when it comes to residency application for IMGs? I don't think that we should consider it as IMG friendly states. There are IMG friendly programs that tend to focus in one state or another. So for example, if I say I want to apply to all the programs in New York, yeah, you'll probably have a better chance of hitting some IMG friendly programs because a lot of them are focused in New York. But that doesn't necessarily make New York an IMG friendly state. It's the number of programs in that state. So there's nothing. We often use this term, and I think incorrectly, because it kind of gives a a different idea when searching for programs. Search for programs that are IMG friendly rather than applying to states that are quote unquote IMG friendly states. So I think that's just a shift in perspective that we should have as IMGs. Are there rural medicine residency programs? Absolutely. And I've actually applied to a few, I've had a few interviews from them. Uh, yeah, there are actually some great programs over there. It's usually family medicine programs. And what differentiates a rural program from a traditional family medicine program is that it's usually an unopposed program, unopposed meaning that there are no other residencies in that facility. So you, as a family physician, you'll be doing everything for that population group. Everything within reason. Obviously, we're not going to do surgical procedures on the patients, but you might do some more hands-on procedures with patients more than a family medicine clinic in a major metropolitan city like Chicago or New York, because you are the only clinician there. So I've spoken with some programs, and they mentioned that as a rural physician, you'll be doing OBGYN, you'll be doing sports medicine, you'll be doing a lot of even some C-sections as a family physician, which is very exciting. So that's one thing that attracted me to rural medicine. So that's just a little overview on how different the patient population group is with physician in rural programs. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. This conversation will be continued at our membership area where you can join for free. The MedFox membership gives you access to our past interviews. Membership also gives you access to our membership area where you can interact with me and other coaches, where we talk about everything residency applications, like how to search for programs, how to write great personal statements, how to get great LORs for residency programs, how to get US clinical experience, and even residency interview strategies. So you can join for free at medfoxacademy.com/join. And if you have any questions about the upcoming residency cycle, feel free to schedule a free initial consultation with me. You could schedule your first session for free at medfoxacademy.com/sessions. Thank you again for attending this webinar, everyone, and we'll see you all in the membership area.